Hello everyone and welcome back into my kitchen. My name is Shannon and I am a homeschooling mama to 8 kiddos. We currently have only 7 of them living at home as my oldest daughter is married and has her own family now. So today I'm working on making some freezer meals. We had a couple at church who were in need of some meals to be made for them, and I signed up to bring them a meal and decided that it was a good opportunity for me to go ahead and get some freezer meals made and put in my freezer, as well as be able to bless them with some food. So today I'm making some baked ziti, some macaroni and cheese casserole, and I also made some of the tortellini alfredo bake that I've made before. I only had one package of tortellini in my freezer, so I just made one batch of that, but that was enough to give us a meal and to give our friends a meal. So that's what I was making. I also had planned on doing some meatloaf, and when I had this hamburger out, this ground beef out to be cooked, instead of leaving some of it raw to form my meatloaf, I accidentally cooked all of it. So the meatloaf got thrown out the window. I did not make that. But I did have some extra leftover ground beef that I used in a few meals the following week, which turned out to be a huge blessing. On this particular day, we had 2 boys get sick with the stomach bug, and it has proceeded through our entire family. I am recovering from it currently, and my oldest son and one of my daughters is recovering currently, and my husband has had it. There actually are only 2 of us left that have not gotten it, and that's the younger 2, which is surprising because usually the youngest ones are the first ones to get sick with that kind of thing. So I'm praying that they don't get it, but if they do, thankfully it has been a quick moving bug, and hopefully they can endure it if they do have to go through that. Here we are just doing some chores, getting the kitchen cleaned up a little bit before I started my freezer cooking. I do like to always start with a clean kitchen because you make such a mess when you're freezer cooking. You have so many dishes out, so many things sitting out on the counters, and I do not have a big enough kitchen to leave stuff laying around while I'm trying to do a big batch freezer cooking like this. So I do have the girls come do their chores. We get the tables or the countertops cleared off so I have enough room to set pans and dishes out. I do, at least on this day, what I did was I worked through one recipe at a time, and I made a goal to only use this one bowl. So after I was finished with this first recipe, I went ahead and washed the dishes up that I had used so that I could reuse them, so as not to have a ton of dirty dishes by the end of my afternoon here. This freezer cooking took me about 3 or 4 hours maybe, and I got several meals out of it with just 3 recipes, but we've eaten all 3 of these recipes actually. The mac and cheese casserole is something I have made up on my own, and it is a really delicious meal that my family really enjoys. It's not the healthiest thing in the world, but it fills bellies and everyone likes it, and there's no complaining when I make it. The baked ziti we've had, and it's not a favorite. I think people will eat it as long as I don't cook them all too close together. Some of my kids don't enjoy this ricotta cheese mixture mixed in with the noodles, and that's okay, but I will still keep those meals for us to be able to use in the future. The baked ziti also gave me an opportunity to use some of that free tomato sauce that we've been getting at the Free Food Ministry, and that was nice because I had a lot of cans stacked up in my pantry, so I was thankful to find a way to use them up. I do big cooking days like this, I try to save them for Fridays because we normally do not have schoolwork on Fridays. So it helps me to be able to just focus on getting this one thing done. Otherwise, when I try to do it during the week when we're supposed to be doing our schoolwork or have schoolwork that day, I just feel stressed out trying to have too much on my plate. I plan these for Fridays so that I can just have the entire day and I don't have to be in a rush. This ground beef that I had cooked up earlier, I found out on a different YouTube channel, Freezer Cooking 101, that 1 pound of ground beef is equal to about 2 1/3 cups of cooked ground beef. So that was my measurement that I was using for this recipe. Because we have a large family and because we get beef from my in-laws who grow it on their farm, I tend to use a little bit extra beef in recipes. Normally the packages that I cook with are 2-pound packages, so if I'm making something like a pan of baked ziti or a pot of spaghetti sauce, if I'm making just enough for our family to eat, I will use 2 pounds of meat. Normally I cook more than that, so I end up using 4 pounds of meat because I'll cook 2 packages at a time. But for this recipe, I was calculating at 2 pounds of meat per pan, and I ended up with 2 of the smaller 8x8 pans and 3 of the larger 9x13 pans to put into my freezer. I actually left one of the 9x13s out and we had it for dinner on the next day, I believe, which was a blessing. And I have already used some of these meals to feed my family. They are a huge convenience for me to be able to pull something out of the freezer in the morning or the night before and stick it in the oven that afternoon. Now the baked ziti was completely thawed when I cooked it because I had never put it in the freezer, but a few days later I pulled out one of my mac and cheese casseroles. I had forgotten to get it out the night before I was going to have it, so I pulled it out the next morning and it was still partly frozen by the time I put it in the oven, and that just meant it took a little while longer to bake, and it turned out fantastic and everyone really enjoyed it. We only had a tiny bit of leftovers left in the pan at the end of the night, so I was just really thankful to have these meals, and I do plan on making more in the future because they really are a huge blessing and make it so easy for me to get dinner on the table for my family. You can see in this portion of the video, I am pulling chunks of cheese out of my bag. That is because I forgot to take this bag of cheese out of the freezer a little bit beforehand so it could thaw a bit, and it was completely frozen and solid. I had actually already banged it on the floor a few times trying to break up some of those chunks, and I did not get all of them. But it did give me enough single shreds of cheese to put on top of my foods, and that worked out well. My hands about froze trying to do this with frozen cheese. I am a wimp when it comes to things cold on my hands. They just get so cold and then my joints ache like crazy. So I ended up actually switching and using a measuring cup trying to dig the cheese out of there so that my hands weren't so cold. After I put the cheese on top, I went ahead and wrapped them up with some foil. And then I put my little labels on them. I just hand wrote these labels. I happened to have them in my drawer and thought that they would be handy. That's another tip I learned over on the Freezer Cooking 101 YouTube channel. And they print theirs off, but I didn't have time for that. So I just wrote out what I had and stuck them on top. And then I got those ones put into the freezer and started on my next meal, which was my mac and cheese casserole. This recipe is really super simple. I use the Velveeta type cheese or Melt and Dip, which is the Great Value brand name for it, and some shell pasta and some milk, and I use some ground beef. All I do is make some macaroni and cheese with the Velveeta cheese and the shell pasta and milk. I add in the cooked ground beef, and then I put that in a pan and sprinkle some cheddar cheese on top and bake it, and it turns out so delicious. This is a favorite meal at my house. I will leave the recipe for this mac and cheese casserole down in the description box, so if you are interested, you can go ahead and give it a try. When I cooked the noodles for these casseroles, I cooked them for about 3 minutes less than what the package said to cook them for. This way they weren't overcooked because they will continue to cook when I bake them in the oven after the meal has been frozen or in the fridge. I also made sure to rinse them with cold water after I dump them out of the boiling water, and this just stops the cooking process so that your noodles are not overcooked and mushy. My family does not enjoy mushy noodles at all. We like our noodles a little bit hard still, maybe even not even cooked all the way, because they don't complain whenever they're a little bit crunchy even. So I made sure to cook them for less time so that they did not come out mushy once they were baked, because no one in my family would enjoy it, and that would be really sad and a waste of meals if it turned out that way. After those were made, I went ahead and put the foil on top of them. I do like to do a double layer of foil. That just helps protect the food a little bit more to keep them from getting freezer burned. These definitely will not be in the freezer for long. I will probably use them within a month or two, so I'm not too worried about them going bad, but I do always put a double layer of foil just to be safe. Then after I finished with the mac and cheese casserole, I went ahead and started cutting up my chicken breasts. If you cannot tell by the way I'm holding my hands, I do not enjoy cutting up chicken breasts. It is one of my least favorite things to do in the kitchen, which is probably why we do not eat chicken very often. I do not enjoy cutting it. I really don't enjoy eating it. It is not one of my favorite things. I would much rather eat beef over chicken. But my family enjoys chicken, and every once in a while it is a nice change to our normal beef that we eat. So I went ahead and bought some chicken for these recipes. I had planned on making another freezer meal with the chicken that I had left over, and it turned out that when I actually took a good look at the recipe, I didn't have half of the ingredients that I needed. And so I decided to just skip that and cube all the chicken and cook it all. And then I ended up putting half of it in this tortellini alfredo bake, and the other half I just stuck in a freezer bag in my freezer and used it in a separate meal later on. And I actually just used that the other day in some chicken noodle soup, which I wanted to make because of all the sickness that's been going around. I had some bone broth in my freezer, and I had that chicken. I made some homemade egg noodles, and we had chicken noodle soup the other day for lunch, which was really yummy, and it got some of that good nutrition from the bone broth into my family to help them get over their sickness a little bit faster. I have these bacon bits in my refrigerator. I bought them a while ago for a recipe, which I think it was at the Super Bowl, so that's how long they've been in there. But decided to use some of those in this tortellini alfredo bake. This turned out really good whenever we had it before, but I did a little bit of something different this time. I added in 1 jar of the tomato sauce from my pantry just to use it up. And I have done this before where I've mixed Alfredo sauce and spaghetti sauce together to make spaghetti, and it's really yummy and my family likes it. So I have no doubt that they will enjoy this chicken tortellini Alfredo bake that I made this time. I got this recipe from the Freezer Meals 101 ladies. I've been watching a lot of their videos lately because I've been trying to plan this freezer cooking day with a couple of my friends actually, and we have yet to pull it off, but I do plan to do it. I really want to. I think it would be a huge blessing for our families to have meals in the freezer, and also just a really fun time of fellowship with some of my friends. So be on the lookout for that video because I do plan on doing it in the future. I just am still in the planning phases and haven't pulled it off yet. Instead of putting this one into the foil pans, I decided to put it into some Ziploc baggies. This one is for our friends. There are only 2 of them, so they don't need a lot. And then for the rest of it, I put into a gallon-size Ziploc bag. My plan with this actually is to cook it in my crock pot instead of in the oven. I thought that might be an easier way to do it. I can just thaw it, dump it into the pot, and let it cook for the day or for the afternoon, and then we'll have an easy meal by the evening or by lunchtime if I start it in the morning. But I wanted to do this one in a Ziploc bag. I know if I can put more meals in Ziploc baggies, they flatten out a little better than they do in the foil pans, which could save some room in my freezer. But today I just did the chicken in a bag, and then I also put the tortellini bake in a bag to stick in the freezer. And then it was time to clean up and get all of the dishes put away that I had used and washed and get my kitchen back in order. So I hope you enjoyed this freezer cooking day with me. I know that this was a huge blessing for us, and I hope that this encouraged you to maybe make a double meal for your family and stick one in the freezer for later, just to bless yourself and make it easier on yourself to give your family good home-cooked meals. Thank you for hanging out with me today, friends. I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.